Hello and a warm welcome to another edition of CVFM World. My name is Idrees Rashid. Keep me company today is my guest, Darren Best, who is the independent chair of a Teeswide Safeguarding Board. A warm welcome to CVFM, Darren. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good, Idris, and thank you to you and your listeners for asking me to come along.
Yeah, it's very nice of you to join us on this a very special week because we're trying to raise awareness of Safeguarding Adults Week. Just tell me a little bit about you and what the Teeswide Safeguarding Board does, first of all.
Yeah, sure. I mean, my role is I'm the independent chair of the Teeswide Safeguarding Adults Board. Some people may have come across me in the past. I've got a background in policing. I was Cleveland Police for 26 years, and then more latterly I was up in Northumbria for the last 4 years of my 30-year police service. But my role now, having left the police service, is to chair the Safeguarding Adults Board, which is made up of a number of different partners, but primarily it's the 4 local authorities that operate across Tees, Hartlepool, Redcar, Cleveland, Middlesbrough and Stockton, the police, together with various health services, and then we have a number of voluntary sector agencies, but also the likes of the fire brigade who sit on it. So it's a wide range of partners who come together under the piece of legislation called the Care Act, which gives a duty on agencies to work together to safeguard adults who live in their area. My role is to chair that board, to chair that group of agencies from an independent perspective and effectively hold them to account to make sure that they do what they say they will do and what they have to do under that legislation. So I'm independent. I'm not employed by, well, actually, I suppose I am employed in one sense, but I'm not beholden to any particular agency. My job is to hold them to account and to make sure that they provide services that will safeguard adults in this area. Really important work.
So you mentioned a number of different organisations and agencies and some statutory in terms of their responsibility in terms of safeguarding. When you're talking about safeguarding, what is safeguarding from your perspective?
I think that's one of the things I would say that I've watched over the years, because both in my policing career and now in this role, what I've seen is safeguarding and the meaning of safeguarding grow quite massively, really, particularly in adult safeguarding. And when I talk about adults, I'm talking about people over 18 years old. So obviously there is separate arrangements around children, so anybody under 18 years old. So I'm specifically here talking about adult safeguarding, but obviously the two tend to be quite interlinked. But when I first started looking at adult safeguarding, it was very much restricted to physical abuse, financial abuse, sexual abuse, and it was quite defined, if you like. Now, it'll be almost 20 years on since we first started talking about adult safeguarding in the way that we do now. In fact, it is 20 years. We're talking a much wider range of issues. So domestic abuse, coercive control, self-neglect, modern day slavery, a wide range of things that effectively, if you want to think of it in its broader sense, there is somebody who is an adult who is vulnerable for whatever reason. It could be that they are vulnerable because of a disability. It could be they're vulnerable because of their mental health. It could be they're physically vulnerable, or it might indeed that they're vulnerable on a temporary basis. If for example, they were suffering some kind of condition or something like that. So there's someone who's vulnerable, and then there is somebody who is effectively taking advantage of that and abusing that person, whether it be financially, whether it be emotionally, whether it's neglecting their needs. But usually what we're talking about is either an individual who is vulnerable, and either an individual who is abusing them, or it could be an organisation or an institution that is causing that person to be abused. So that's safeguarding in a relative nutshell.
And what sort of abuse can occur? You mentioned sort of financial abuse. Is that someone who sort of might be mentally impaired and relying on others that are taking advantage of that? Can that be like a care setting?
Yeah, absolutely. It could be in a number of different settings. I mean, what I would say is, having spent 30 years in policing and then in this type of role for the last couple of years, I still never fail to be surprised by the means in which people will be unkind or indeed going further than that, exact criminal behaviour against vulnerable people. So yes, in terms of financial abuse, it absolutely, or indeed any abuse, could happen in a care setting. It could be a relative, it could be a close relative, it could be a carer, it could be a friend, or someone who appears to be a friend. And indeed, some people put themselves in positions where they purport to be a friend or a carer, and the person who's being abused, or even the people around that person, think that person is genuinely doing a good job in looking after the person, when at the same time the person is abusing them. And as I say, it could be physically, it could be emotionally, it could be sexually, it could be financially. But essentially, I guess the whole point of this week is to make people think, and to make people, and ask people to think, are you comfortable? Is there anything about that situation, whether it be your own situation or a situation that you're aware of, that makes you feel uncomfortable? And sometimes there's hard evidence of why you should feel uncomfortable, but sometimes you just get a feeling about a situation that you just think, that's just not right. The way that person talks to that other person, the way that they treat them, the way that they seem to be keeping them indoors and no one's getting to see them as you would expect them to. So it's about people thinking, it's about people being concerned, and about looking, and then as a consequence, asking for some advice and some support. Thankfully, a lot of situations there will be an innocent explanation, but I would argue it's better to go and have a look at that situation, let someone examine it, and let someone have a look at it, and then let's all be reassured. Or if it's not that let somebody intervene and help the person who is being abused.
When you're looking at safeguarding, and cultural norms are different in different countries, and Teeswide and Middlesbrough areas are becoming more and more diverse, and we've got people come from all over the world that are living here. What might be acceptable in other parts of the world in terms of behaviour isn't here in terms of legislation in the UK. So what sort of message do you have for people that have maybe that living in a family structure, that individuals come from another country, they're not aware of their rights in this country, and they might be abused in some way, whether it's financially, emotionally, physically, sexually. How do we support those individuals, and what sort of message do you have for the wider community in that sense?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of points in there. I think that the first thing is that, as you rightly say, Idrees, what may be some may say is acceptable in other countries, whether it is or not, I think is actually a debatable point, isn't it, as to whether it really is acceptable, whether people just say that it is. But I do know that a number of communities, and ethnic minorities communities, they look after each other really well. But in that also means that they don't necessarily access services in the way that other communities might. And that in itself can leave vulnerable people open to abuse, because I think I genuinely believe all communities have got really good, generally really good, kind, caring people within them, and there's lots of evidence to show that. But we should also know that all communities will have other people with other motives in amongst them as well. And so I guess my plea is for people just to look at other people's situations or their situation and just ask themselves the question of, is this right? Actually, when we hear some of the stories in the news about abuse and things coming out that have happened years and years ago, or things that have happened recently, is there some similarities here to what we're seeing in our situation or that person's situation? And what I would say in terms of advice, that there's loads of places that people can get advice. As I say, there's all sorts of voluntary agencies that exist, but a really good place for people to go and have a look at is the Teeswide Safeguarding Adults Board website. I think most people these days have access to the internet, and I know that not all don't, but if they have got access to the internet, there is loads of information on that website in different languages and different formats to hopefully help people understand. Also on that website are a number of different phone numbers, and I know you said you'll put as part of this, you'll put phone numbers out. I haven't memorised the numbers of all the different agencies, but all of the local authorities, the police, health agencies, voluntary sector agencies, there are loads of numbers. There is loads of help out there for people to have a conversation, and I guess that's what this week is about. It's about listening. And when you look at what the Anne Craft Trust, who were putting the Adult Safeguarding Week together, one of the main themes that they're looking at is about listening to people who are in a caring relationship where they are a vulnerable person, or indeed those people who are offering support, listening to what they've got to say and then thinking that through in terms of what's the appropriate advice or support that we can give to help them in their situation.
And there are specialist organisations, agencies out there. For example, we've done some work with the Halo Project, which is about supporting people with, honour-based violence and forced marriage. And I was talking to one of their caseworkers where she came across a lady who came to the UK as a spouse of a British national, living within a family unit. And she didn't have any immediate family with her. Her contact with her parents was stopping in terms of messages and things like that. So that particular individual was very vulnerable within that household. So it's identifying those, and she had bruising on a frequent basis where the family was physically abusive to her. So it's looking out for signs like that where as a shop worker, as a community member, that someone might be in a difficult situation, and to look out for these signs.
Absolutely, yeah. Because as you rightly say there, Idrees, some people are isolated. Some people might not have the language skills to be able to immediately ask for help, or they themselves may think that this situation is normal, and it's been normalised for them by the situation that they're in. And so, in those types of situations, that's where there's a duty on us all, I would argue, as good citizens, as people who are caring and people who want other people not to be in abusive situations, to look out for it. As you say, it could be the way somebody's presenting, if they're particularly nervous, if you've got some physical signs of abuse, or if indeed that they might be hinting that there's something not quite right, but are unable to actually say it out loud. And for the people who see that, to get as much information as they can. And rather than them thinking, oh, I'm just being nosy, someone's just going to think I'm being nosy, because I know that's a big concern for people, that they think, this might not be welcome. What I can say to you is, anyone who comes forward with that type of information, it will be dealt with in confidence, and certainly initially, while we gather information, and it'll be dealt with sensitively. And people are not going to go booling in, and certainly nobody's going to be angry with someone for reporting an issue that's hopefully going to help somebody. And as I say, if it turns out that there's no problem there, then all to the good. But let's have a look at it first, and let's try and help someone who may need some help.
And I think as part of this week, we are having conversations with the community and faith leaders as well. And I think it's, when you look at, whether it's mosque, Sikh temple, Gurdwara, whatever, I think all community and faith leaders need to have this conversation, and whether they're congregation members or them, the wider community, they need to be having this conversation.
Well, I mentioned that a significant part of this week was about listening. There's 3 L's in this week. The second one is about leadership, and leadership, and having the right attitude to safeguarding, making sure that your organisation, whether that be a mosque or a place where people worship, whether it be a community centre, or whether it be a care setting of another sort, or whatever, that the leaders of that organisation recognise what their duties are. And I mean, without going off on a tangent, we saw some of this, didn't we, last week around Yorkshire Cricket Club, and some of the issues there. And the failure there was around leadership. And I think rightly now people have stood down from positions that they had at Yorkshire, because they recognised there needed to be a change in leadership, which would then hopefully change the culture, which is the ultimate aim of this week, is to start to change some cultures around safeguarding and thinking around safeguarding, so that people see that reporting it is acceptable, helping people is acceptable, and actually staying quiet and doing nothing, it isn't acceptable. And the third L just is about learning. Looking at what's gone wrong in the past, looking at reports or issues that have happened elsewhere in the country or have happened in the past, and thinking, right, okay, well, how do we avoid that situation happening within our organisation or our institution, and how do we do that? So that listening, leadership, and learning are really three key points of this week, and that's what it's about. My final message would be brave. Do something and look for things. If you're aware of something that's happening that you're uncomfortable with, be brave and ask for some support, ask for some advice, so that other people who've got true expertise and training in these areas can have a look at that situation. And you might just be stopping a situation or stopping somebody from being abused. And at the end of the day, I genuinely believe that people who live and work in this area are good people who want to help other people. And that's, I guess my final message would be, if you're aware of something, be brave and do the right thing.
So if you want any further information, all that is available at Teeswide Adult Safeguarding Board, and you can we'll put all the information in the description of this particular live as well. So thank you for watching. Take care of yourself. We'll be back again with some more guests very soon. Thank you.